Hello, dear paid subscribers of World Briefing. Well, today is Saturday. Of course, that means only one thing. This is your day for your exclusive video for World Briefing. As you can see, I am in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and as you can also see, the smog behind me is absolutely horrific. I don't need to go into detail as to why, because that was covered in yesterday's World Briefing in quite a bit of detail, including in a video, but it's actually worse today, and it really makes life unbearable, not necessarily for me, but the vulnerable, especially the elderly. And it's something that authorities here have little control over. And just news over the past 24 hours that in northern Thailand, where I noticed there were warnings about heat alerts and lack of rainfall, governors of provinces there have declared a state of emergency, closing down national parks to eliminate the wildfire threat. So all through this region, very tough times because of basically changing weather patterns. Now, I wanted to shift a little bit because I haven't spent much time because of the Middle East war talking about the war in Ukraine, but absolutely extraordinary numbers of Russian losses because of the war in Ukraine, which of course started in February 2022. But of course, we also have to think about going back to 2014 when Russia illegally seized Crimea and took over parts of the Donbass. But the Center for Strategic and International Studies has released some numbers, and the numbers of Russian casualties are described as extraordinary numbers. And here's why. 1.2 million casualties, and that includes 325,000 killed in action. Now, the Ukrainians say that the losses on the Russian side have actually been many times more than that. 1.3 million troops lost in Ukraine. No way to verify that number. And the Russian losses are staggering when you also think about the U.S. losses in two major wars, in Korea and also in Vietnam. Korean War was 54,000, Vietnam War 47,000, maybe 58,000 if you include missing in action. And this is described by CSIS and analysts as more losses than any major power since World War II. Some describe the lack of advance as similar or even worse than World War I, but I'll get to that in a minute, because I also wanted to give you the Ukrainian figures as well. Casualty figures, according to CSIS, number between 500 and 600,000, and that includes 100,000 to 140,000 killed in action. Now, that number of KIA is much higher than President Zelensky told a media outlet in February. He said 55,000 have been killed, but that's hard to square with what I and others see on the ground of expanding military cemeteries. Speaking of which, military cemeteries in Russia, they're of course getting much bigger, to the point where Russian authorities are reported to have obliterated or made blurry on maps these cemeteries so that people can't measure how much they've grown. Now, I mentioned the lack of Russian advances. According to CSIS, the Russians have, now get this, listen carefully, advanced at an average rate of only 15 to 70 meters per day. Slower than the most brutal offensive campaigns over the last century. Okay, since the start of 2024, less than 1.5% of Ukrainian territory has been seized by the Russians. If you go back to 2014, they now control 20% of Ukrainian territory, which is about the size of Pennsylvania. So again, that includes illegally annexed Crimea, as well as territory seized in Donbass in 2014. Now, my friend Simon Ostrowski has done some interesting reporting on PBS NewsHour, as he usually does, and in his report, he shows absolutely horrific videos of Russian soldiers, not Ukrainian POWs, but Russian soldiers being tortured, being electrocuted, being sexually abused. He says there's incredible corruption and brutality happening to their own kind. And this happens because Russian soldiers refuse to hand over their pay to their commanders. And many are dying not being able to afford these extortions. And if you want to get out of the nasty part of the war, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So, for example, the figures Ostrowski provided to work, for example, as a drone operator away from the dangerous front lines, probably that'll cost you around $2,000. If you want to work in the rear of the front line, that would be $6,000. And if you want to get a forced medical discharge, that would be about $12,000. And also reports of, salaries, 80% of the troop salaries being forced to be handed over. It shows how desperate things are on the Russian side, and also if we take into account, including desperation, that as of this time, oil and gas revenues on the Russian side are down about 24%, if not more. So there's a lot of course, temptation on the part of the government to seize whatever money it can, even from its own troops, to help prop up a very faltering economy. I am going to be heading on a kind of whistle-stop tour this month, starting late Monday with a stop in the Middle East. Again, just for security purposes, I don't want to say where. And then also I'm going to be headed to Turkey, and then after that I'm going to be headed to Armenia, but going as far as Armenia's border with Iran. So every stop along the way, I am going to be giving you some sort of report of what I'm picking up on the ground. Oh, and by the way, that does also include a quick stop in Egypt on the way, again, talking to experts, journalists, diplomats. So once again, if you know of anybody who you think should be a paid subscriber to World Briefing, please nudge them, because it does help fund this reporting and commentary mission. Now, quickly turning to the war in the Middle East, not a very good past 24 hours for U.S. forces. 2 aircraft have been shot down. A serviceman is lost. There's a big search effort to recover him. So it was an F-15 and also a Warhawk military aircraft. So this comes at a very tough time, of course, for the nation as it tries to grapple with this war, but also for President Trump, who has really downplayed the impact of this war, has no exit strategy to speak of, and many people not even understanding why the U.S. actually went into this war. And that's the problem when you have a huckster as president. He tries to sell you anything with very little rationale behind it. But I wanted to play you a clip from PBS The NewsHour of a retired military chap who explained what should happen right now with an airman lost on the ground in Iran, what exactly should happen. So here's that clip. I'll see you on the other side.
There should be a pause to operations. Typically with downed aircraft, downed crew members, there will be a pause, but sometimes theater-wide, and all assets, all priorities are put to that recovery effort. But there should also be a pause and a reassessment of, what we call risk to the force, to U.S. forces, versus risk to the mission. The U.S. has bombed so many targets in the last few weeks. Making the decision to just continue forward and continue a strike campaign with a risk that we haven't properly assessed yet to our armed forces would be, frankly, just incredibly irresponsible at this point. So I hope there is a halt and a reassessment strategically and operationally here.
So that meant a lot to me, to listen to that guy who has a lot of experience to say things should be paused right now. And so far, as a reminder, 13 U.S. servicemen have been lost since the start of the war. In the meantime, President Trump is asking for a record $1.5 trillion in defense spending for this year. That's 40% higher than last year, and including that is funding for immigration enforcement, ICE, for also some sort of beautification projects in Washington, D.C., and also for air traffic controllers, which is a good thing. Things are not going well with the war, and one thing that President Trump does not seem to understand that we are one global economy right now. So he may say the U.S. is not dependent on oil from the Gulf. Problem is, many other economies are, many allies are, including here in Malaysia, which is an ally of the United States. Prices here are going up, as I've been reporting throughout the week, in the Philippines and Thailand. Little guy on the ground getting hit the most, especially those ride-hailing drivers, food delivery drivers, people like that. It's really squeezing them. Don't even get me started or them started on the rising cost of inflation. So that's where we are on this Saturday at the beginning of April. Once again, thank you very, very much for your support of World Briefing. I'm so privileged and grateful to be where I am, to be doing what I am, and to be going where I'm going to be going, to be able to report to you from the front lines and giving you a really real sense of what's happening on the ground. I forgot to add one important thing, of course, is in my Whistle Stop tour, I am going to be returning to my base in Ukraine and giving you fresh updates from there as well, because I know many of my subscribers, my listeners, are very interested in reports from what's going on in Ukraine. Have a great week ahead, everyone, and everyone stay safe and happy travels.